So getting back to how Mouse ruined comics.
Okay.
All right, 30 seconds. Your 30 seconds are up. No more boomer music.
Ladies and gentlemen, kids of all ages, it is Wednesday. It is Wednesday, right? I'm not totally lost off my head. Well, you're all here. It's got to be Wednesday. There we go.
Probably.
It's the most recent, the most up to date, the most exciting episode of the Mattriarchy to broadcast live on YouTube. On time too. Now I'm
on
late.
time meaning on Wednesday.
Oh yeah. It's within the correct 24 hours period. So we are today. It's become our usual gaggle of four, and we are here talking about Tom King's Wonder Woman, the first three issues of his little Wonder Woman run, and
Oh boy.
It's just rough. Okay. Before we dive in, there is one thing I want to talk about real quick because what is everybody's take, their opinion, their history with Wonder Woman? Let's do a real quick round robin in that, and then dive into what we're expecting, what we're picking up here. So, Hutch, you would I'm just guessing based upon reasons that you might have the most extensive Wonder Woman experience.
Actually, the number of issues that I have prior to issue 300 of the first run is maybe a couple. And I got issue 300, which introduced the girl who would become Fury and from Earth 2. And then I got the last issue when they had the Crisis on Infinite Earths. And that's pretty much it, except for maybe I've gone back and gotten one where Blue Devil appeared or something like that. It's just here and there I might have grabbed one. But and yet somehow I know a lot of Wonder Woman history because I think I read books in the library when I was growing up.
Right? Fair.
Books that told the basic story of how she got her jet, how she got this and that, overviews of Wonder Woman's life story and that kind of thing. So I know all about the Kangas and the Silver Age. I know about how Wonder Girl was created by an accident by an editor who didn't know that Wonder Girl was Wonder Woman when she was younger and just said Wonder Girl will be in the Teen Titans. And it's there is no what and so everybody talks about Donna Troy and she's just a retcon, but I know Donna Troy, of course, because I read Teen Titans during that time. And then I read from the time, and I read all the Justice League comics, and she's all over the Justice League and Super Friends, growing up. So I know a lot of Wonder Woman, and of course I know the TV show. So which was amazing. So I have the many fond memories of the TV show, and then George Perez's run, I have every issue, and there are some beautiful stories in there that are just. I was telling before you came here, I was talking about how I had no idea George Perez would be such a great writer because I just knew he was one of the all-time great artists. But his stories were really good. The story of how Wonder Woman has her armor and is named Diana, the same name as Steve Trevor's mom, is amazing. And it works so well. It explains why Wonder Woman has a costume that looks like America, and it makes sense. And we're not talking about that today, but I'm just saying I knew all that run, and I was just bemoaning how he left, and writers after him made such a mess of Wonder Woman. They changed Vanessa Capitelis, this wonderful three-dimensional character, into one of her villains, which I still just detest that plot point. And then I read some of the John Byrne run, and I've read some here and there from other people since then. And biggest thing that you should know about me is that I will be writing Wonder Woman someday. When Wonder Woman, I announced it a year ago. When Wonder Woman falls into public domain, I'm writing her because unlike Superman, unlike Batman, everything you like about Wonder Woman is public domain that first day. I mean, pretty much that first year anyway. Everything is there. You don't have to wait for her villains or anything because her villains aren't all that great. So you can just write a Wonder Woman comic that's going to be really good. So that's what I'm going to do. Amazon Princess is what I'll have to call it, I'm sure, because they'll have the title. You won't be able to call it Wonder Woman across the title, but that's what I'm going to do. About a decade from now, that I have to live that long. So when I'm 67, that is my retirement plan. I will be writing Wonder Woman.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Okay, go ahead.
Witless, how about you?
So it's like here and there and everywhere. But I will say that I'm starting to dive into her very early history, which is the Golden Age. So I have a chunk of knowledge that has to do with the first, volume of this character coming out, and then of course her creator, William Moulton Marston, and all of his nutty professor nutty professor background. For our audience, for our audience's sake, he is a fascinating individual. He was part of a throuple for like his a chunk of his life. So he basically had a harem, essentially, two wives, more or less. And on top of that, he was also one of the contributors that helped create the modern lie detector test. He did the systolic pressure element to that. And so that whole lasso. Almost done. I just have to make that link for our audience. The lasso of truth, the thing that detects lies, came from the guy or one of the guys who helped create that test. So that little bit of trivia I thought was absolutely fascinating. Him as a person and a writer is also fascinating as well. But that's kind of my background. Some of my background that I think I'll share today regarding Wonder Woman,
and all the bondage elements that he introduced.
Oh gosh, yes. Oh,
yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing I wanted to bring up though. Is like if you guys take a moment and think about. We've talked about this on the show. Frederick Wortham, Seduction of the Innocent. Nerds for 50 years have been shaking their fists at this guy, and in relationship to Wonder Woman, he was 100% correct. The dude was an absolute deviant, should have been allowed out of the house.
Carmine Infantino said as much to me.
Did he know? Did he'd spent some time with Moulton?
Somehow one of his best-selling covers ever of Batman lying prone as Batgirl and Catwoman come in to fight over his prone body was like an idea that Moulton Marston had somehow shared, and Carmine Infantino said he knew his stuff. That worked really well, but
sold a lot of pictures. Oh yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that cover.
Yeah.
No, he was definitely, and that's his fetishism. No other word for it. His fetishism is part of what's interesting. One of the interesting aspects about Marston is his fetishism is a philosophical fetishism, because he works it directly into the ethos of what Wonder Woman is supposed to be. And reading those early comics it's a very interesting picture. But I don't get too. I might as well. Nah, I'll save it.
We'll save it because it plays into the story.
Yeah,
in like deep dark ways that I don't know if we'll get to all of it, but it's definitely in there. Cartoonicus, what about you?
It's one of the when drawn right, she's got one of the few superhero costumes I can actually like.
Always with those hot takes.
I love it. It's amazing.
It's about what I've got for you.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
So,
can I say before we jump into it, I wanted to say that like my thesis for even wanting to do some of this is I had this idea, which is Tom King has this reputation for basically having this kind of dommy mommy fetish where he writes these like dominant women and he writes the men as like, in this sub position. And like, that's kind of where I think a lot of people complained about his Batman run, is how he put Catwoman in dommy mommy position and Batman underneath that. A lot of people kind of rubbed them the wrong way. So in theory, my idea was like, okay, if you have a writer who has those proclivities, the character that he should be the least annoying with in theory, would be Wonder Woman, because Wonder Woman has that in her DNA from day one. We can't ignore that. Like, Dami Mommy is.
You were so wrong.
Dami Mommy.
So wrong.
I'm actually think I'm still right. I just think that Tom King's weaknesses still made this comic irritating. I think that out of all the characters that Tom King can write, I still think that this is the best one. I'll find.
He cannot write a character if that's true.
I think this is the closest he can get.
If this is his best, oh my goodness!
I'm just saying.
I have heard. I'm going to say this before we get into it. Right, one of the
Yeah.
things that I had the biggest problem with in this whole story, the 3 issues, we just did the first 3. The thing I found the most disturbing was how everybody talked like a robot except Steve Trevor. Steve Trevor had the only voice in the entire comic. Everybody else said, well, no, that's not true. Steve and Sergeant Steele did not sound like Sarge Steele, but he sounded like somebody. But everybody else talked like a robot, which is funny to me because I still run into people when I get on a real tear about Tom King who bring up the Vision miniseries, as though Tom can definitely write. The Vision miniseries is really good.
It's a robot.
Where everyone's a robot.
I detected he has 2 voices he can use. There is smug, overbearing, the intellectual who knows more than you and everybody else and is totally in control, and you will bow to the master, which is the way Wonder Woman talks. It's the way the Sovereign talks. It's the way about 3 or 4 other characters talk constantly in here, and Sarge Steele talks that way a lot too.
Yeah.
And then there is swearing a lot and being the more normal person, which basically means they swear, which is all Beetle Bailey swearing, but that's the only other voice.
Y'all are being too harsh. Wonder Woman has these moments, these wonderful little moments where she actually has, and I actually put this in our chat where I was like, here's a good Wonder Woman panel. Like, that's a good Wonder Woman would say that, and that's a good like and it was like one panel, and then it would like flip back to what Hutch had said. It would flip back to something really obnoxiously arrogant, and then it would sometimes flip back to her saying something. It's actually I think it's in issue 2 when she's facing off with the U.S. Army, and she has this moment where she talks about how
insufferable.
But
it's all insufferable.
Nah, there's like they said, there were these little flashes, and I was like, do more of that.
Okay, guys, let's realize for something. Insufferable, isn't even a good word, because it is sufferable. It's suffering.
Okay, we have enough emotion on the table. We have enough takes on the table. Let's take a step back.
Let's dig into the meat a little bit.
Let's give a little bit of an overview of just what happens in the first few issues. Broad strokes. If you don't mind, I'll give a little summary of it. You guys can jump in, throw in some details,
okay.
But then we can break it down a little bit. So the pitch of this book at the very beginning, and I will say, I think it's very clear that Tom King is writing for the trade, and he's also having because those of you who've read even further ahead will know that by issue like 6 or 7, they have to start doing absolute power tie-ins that go for 2 or more issues. Derails the whole thing.
There's a second trade that they're working in there too.
But Tom King's story that he wants to tell is this for Dawn of DC Wonder Woman. Okay, so this is Dawn of DC, a number 1, technically issue 801. For those of you trying to keep track of that aspect of it, starts off with a bang. Essentially, we have a group of ruffians at a bar, and they all get ruthlessly murdered by an Amazon.
And this was the first moment of absolute cringe, because the dialogue was written exactly in the way of like a Twitter or Facebook comment. Like, my 7-year-old came to me and said, yeah, I press X to doubt everything there. Nobody talks like that. That's the way people say.
Let's save that for a second. So broad strokes, right? We have we have a murder of a whole bunch of people at a bar, and this kicks
everybody.
off,
all of the dudes at this bar,
all the men, of course, because we have
19 men killed at the bar.
So the U.S. government steps in and says, "Okay, this is the inciting incident to basically deport all the Amazons from America." Which apparently there's a lot of them here, which is, I think, a newer development, because for a lot of Wonder Woman's history, for those of you at home, Wonder Woman historically has been one of the only one or two few, right? Like three, maybe, just very, very small number of Amazons allowed off the island. Most of them are supposed to be on it due to the mythological nature of Themyscira, or Paradise Island, if you're going back to the Golden Age. The idea that you had a special island of all women that were under the protection of Greek gods. I think it was Hera originally. And they only got their protection and their immortality because they separated themselves from the world of men. And Wonder Woman was the ambassador. She was the one who was supposed to come to our world.
Crisis, it was a whole collection of female gods. So it was Hera and
would have been a female.
It was all the female gods and Mercury.
Or that made Wonder Woman, but yeah. But I think. But anyway.
either way, you had this special. So what they've done now apparently is they've kind of done what I think Marvel's done with Asgard, which is just they're all just now your next door neighbors. The American government decides to deport all the Amazons, which of course is, we can't do that. And so Wonder Woman's going to try to get to the root of what's really going on here. And in the midst of discovering what's really going on here, she uncovers essentially the deep state. Which is who really rules America. Considering that Tom King, for those of you at home, was a spook or worked for the CIA or something like that in some capacity.
He's been a bunch of stuff, but he was the
interesting take. No, I'm talking about Tom King.
Tom King is a psyop. So I mean that's
I know that it's been said that he had some connections to that. So basically Wonder Woman discovers the deep state essentially, and there's who's really in charge of America, and the person who's really been running America behind the scenes, pulling the strings, is this King character called the Sovereign, and that is the pitch of the story of the first few issues. Wonder Woman basically trying to uncover this conspiracy. The book, however, is completely narrated by ostensibly the Sovereign, although I have an asterisk there. I'm not sure if it's actually him. And so there's some interesting things going on with how this story is told that I think we should talk about at a certain point, because it's not just what we're seeing. We have an unreliable narrator.
Yes.
And that is something that I have to wait on before I can fully judge, because the whole point of that unreliableness is this idea that you're being lied to. And that's very, very clearly a huge theme underlying this book. And so I'm wondering if when they do the old twisteroonies in the latter half of this, I'm wondering if that's going to change anything or not. But that is the setup, and it's very clearly the setup, because it starts off with essentially the villain or antagonist narrating everything from like pretty much the first page, I think, is he? Yeah. First panel, first page. It is the villain narrating this, and we know the villain lies.
I don't dislike narration as a plot device, but one of the big problems is that, oh my gosh, like this entire first issue is told, not shown.
Yeah.
Like all the stuff going on there. You have the original massacre where you have an Amazon woman that comes in, and somebody like cups her butt cheek, and then she kills everybody she can lay hands on. That's a dude.
And
right?
We should mention she is wearing Wonder Woman's outfit. And we do not see Wonder Woman herself until the end of the book, but every Amazon we see along the way is wearing a Wonder Woman outfit, which I don't know why.
I was originally assuming she must be, what's her name, her sister.
No, this is Emily.
Emily,
And
Emily.
later on, we see everybody is wearing the same.
I thought for a minute it was Artemis. That was my first.
Yeah, well, and that's what I thought at first too. And then there's another. Then there's another Amazon. Actually, there's two other Amazons that are living in the outskirts of DC, because the all the behind the scenes stuff. You've got these resident aliens. And one of them wipes out a bunch of them. And so Congress does something that Congress never does, and immediately passes a law.
Right.
I wonder what this could be a reference to, by the way.
I wonder.
Yeah. This was disgusting. They immediately passed a law that extricates all Amazons from the country. And here's the thing I don't understand. The Amazons are from Paradise Island. And they throw themselves into combat yelling for paradise after they've killed people with swords and stuff.
Yeah.
Yet they're hostile to leave, this hateful patriarchy to go back to Paradise Island.
So this is a problem. If I can just have a short little side note, one of the weakest parts of this book, I have a few things I'll praise about it, but one of the weakest parts, and this is the thing that I think drags down Tom King's writing from what it could be, because I think
is it the giant clubs a ham on the end of his arms that he mashes into everything he touches?
All right, here's my opinion on this. I think I enjoy Joshua Williams' writing more. I think it's very clear after a couple of pages that Tom King is a smarter, more intelligent writer than Williamson is. But being smart doesn't mean you're a good storyteller.
No. There's nothing smart about this book.
No.
The characterization is inconsistent. The motives don't make any sense.
Let me finish.
The picture.
Let him finish. Let him finish.
Let me finish my thought. Because you're not wrong, Reese. What I'm saying, though, is that if you put Tom King and Joshua Williamson together and they both took like you did testing on them to see who was had a higher IQ, I'm almost positive that Tom King would be smarter, air quotes, in this sort of but what I'm saying is that intelligence enough, because Williamson couldn't write a smart character. It just didn't happen. But Williamson wrote a story that I cared more about. Whereas Tom King is working with an unreliable narrator, and I'm not.
He's just read a couple more books. That's all. He's just playing with kids that already exist in the milieu.
I'm not. Don't take
what he's saying. There's a difference.
He picked up a book at the Barnes and Noble, 16 Tricks for New Writers, and he's just walking through that book. I mean, there's
what he's doing with the unreliable narrator.
Right, like I said, I'm pretty sure I have a book on the shelf that talks about that.
What he's doing is a little smarter than what Williamson typically does. However, I think that because Tom King has these anchors around his neck, and one of them is politics, and it is current day, will be dated in 10 years kind of political. It's like South Parking yourself. And it's so what he's very clearly doing, again, for those of you at home, he's very clearly constructing a story about Trumpism and misinformation. The whole setup here is we have this secret king character.
And this is the thing that why this is unforgivable and why this is, there's no level of intelligence behind this man, right? Mm-hmm. In order for his story to work, he has to lie about everyone involved, right? None of the characters have believable motivations. None of the characters are portrayed in an authentic way, according to their previously revealed characters, with the possible exception of this version of Steve Trevor, who I'm not super familiar with, right? But that's not Wonder Woman on screen, right? It's not Wonder Woman on the panel. That's not Sarge Steele on the panel, right? It's a race swapped, gender swapped Amanda Waller at the very best.
I'm trying to.
I mean, the way Sarge Steele acts would be more appropriate for King Faraday than for Sarge Steele.
Right, we're fixating here. Let me paint a broader argument, and then we can pick it apart.
King Faraday.
Let Twitless finish, and then
Okay.
So one of the things, and I was going to back up your point, which is the fact that I think Tom King could be a better writer than he is, and one of the things that is weighing him down is the need that many people have, which is I have to fight some battle in real life using the world of fiction. And by doing that, you end up with a lot of inconsistencies. Okay. And that is what that leads to many of the problems that we can nitpick in this book. Right. So for example, we have this setup of, I want this story to be about misinformation and how people on the right are basically used as pawns by the upper rightoids who are all evil, right? The Trumps and the other people in the GOP. So I'm going to paint this story where it was clearly a setup where this incident happened, and then it got used as a casus belli to deport You very clearly deport all the Amazons. And oh my gosh, do you see how people on the right are manipulated by misinformation? That's the angle being taken. However, as we just talked about, when you try to fight real world battles with the tool of fiction and you're not paying enough attention to being a good storyteller, you end up with this really weird scenario where, as Reese just mentioned, you have a bunch of Amazons who come from a perfect women only island where men cannot be there by under penalty of death. It's so perfect, and it's a utopia, and they've eliminated disease, and it's perfect, and it's equality.
Except for all the baby boys that they kill.
Depends which continuity you're
in the golden. Well, I'm going with the golden age version. The golden age version, there were just no.
Yeah. In the and that's one of the things that they play with on the question about that. It's the unreliable narrator thing, but I believe that the current DC universe, that storyline from the New 52 is still canon, I think.
I don't know, because that's one of the things they really play with is she born from being molded out of clay by her mother, or was she born from her having an affair with, I think, Zeus?
So remember with Brainiac, it's all true. It's all depending on what you want to.
And see, that's what you have to make up your mind, come up with a backstory and stick to it. You can't have both and everything, and that's what they do here. She says she's clay. She says, and they say, no, you're clearly half a god, and it's like, oh my gosh.
So they decided to do. They decided to do, and again, I'm not saying it's a good idea, but they've decided to do is to take that quip that the Joker said, which is, I'm going to have a background. I might as well have it be multiple choice, and they've applied it to a lot of other characters. It seems. So unless that's the impression I get. Okay, so back to Tom King though. So Reese, you're right. That anchor of I have to fight this real world battle about, immigration, and I'm going to use the Amazons to do it. It falls apart on its face because of what we know about these fictional characters. No writer could probably, it just doesn't work. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, so that's a choice. And if that choice had not been made, the story probably would have been stronger. Let me give a really good example about how this works and works better. Okay. So Chris Claremont was someone who used political elements to stir up drama, but he understood at the heart of it that he needed to sell you on there being nuance to this. So in Days of Future Past, I brought this up before, but in Days of Future Past, you have the whole mutant argument, and you have Senator Kelly, who's their bigot senator. But Senator Kelly comes to a congressional hearing, and he makes a good point. And he says, is there a place for regular humans in a world where Doctor Doom, the Fantastic Four, and X-Men run about? Are we in danger? These people can completely destroy us at the drop of a hat. And if those of you who don't read comics, you can pull up, I think it's X3, The Last Stand, a really great quote that the president says when he says, people get nervous when there are other men who can move cities with their minds. Mm-hmm. Like this is a troubling thing. We can't just hand wave it and say, oh, she's a good guy. Like real people would be like, that person can wave their hand and the city explodes. So there is a more intelligent way to have Amazons be at conflict with the world and have a debate about it. If you have women who have the strength of 50 men running around the country, and anytime that a guy makes a pass at them, they're likely to go off and kill a dozen men. We'd need to have a national conversation about this. And there would need to be, there would be people, because there would be wives, there'd be mothers who'd say, my boy he just passed by that thing and you killed him. Like there would be, and Chris Claremont knew how to write that.
Yeah. That's part of it. That's part of the reason why I say this is a super low IQ take, why I can't concede that Tom King could possibly have a whit of intelligence about him.
Right. You notice that what I said Tom King was smarter than Joshua Williamson. I didn't say he was smart as a concept.
Here's the thing is Joshua Williamson, right? Joshua Williamson sets up typically the Brainiac was a little bit of a letdown. I think there are reasons for that.
Good Lord.
In the what?
I said good Lord, yes.
Yes. But in the first, especially the first two story arcs in the Superman he was telling, right? He sets up realistic motivations. And even if some of the connecting tissue is a little thin, the characters are behaving in ways that make sense. In this, the characters are not behaving in ways that make sense. And They are not. They're just. They're the world is not abiding by rules.
Reese, my point is that,
for example, like if you're dealing with if you have several hundred crazed Amazons, and nobody in America is defending them. No, that in Montana, there was nobody at that bar who was armed in West Billings, Montana. Are you crazy?
Okay, she's an Amazon. She has ways to counter.
Amazons aren't bulletproof.
Depend. Some of them get kind of like
that's why the whole bullets and bracelets is a thing.
Yeah, it depends on which.
If you can push a sword through a woman, she's not bulletproof.
Yeah.
And they do that in this story.
Well,
unless it's a magical sword, or she's
one of the things they
strong,
specifically mentioned is that the shields are bulletproof and the people are not. That's
Amazon.
actually
I just want to say that Amazon power levels have never been super consistent.
Yeah, that's true.
Sometimes they're portrayed as being way.
But we see them get gunned down in this very scene.
That is true. Well, right. That is true. But they mentioned they had special bullets for that.
For the shields.
Mm-hmm.
It says for the
That's
shields.
True. That is true. But I mean, like, it's comics. She's so fast and strong. She killed them all before. It's that doesn't bother me.
So to Halloweener's point, it's called propaganda. The man's not stupid. Propaganda to work has to be hidden. Everything that comics has been for the last 50 years has largely been left-leaning propaganda, but it was subtle enough that the rubes didn't notice it, or were able to notice it and say it's a good story anyway. Right?
Comics are not known for being super subtle, if I may add.
This one is a situation where everybody hates it, and Tom King sucks.
All right, so my point,
there are enough people that have just entirely sworn off Tom King's altogether.
I'm trying to say is that I think that Tom King's choices to embrace his brand of propaganda is making him more stupid, or is making his writing more stupid. That he himself, because smart people can sometimes be really stupid in the decisions they make. It doesn't mean that they don't have a super high IQ. There's some geniuses, and the only way to explain that the coexistence of the smart and the stupid is to understand that there is a dividing line between your actual IQ or brilliance and the choices you make and the values you have chosen to follow or swallow. So that's kind of what I'm trying to tease out here is just seeing the technical aspects of King's writing. I can see, okay, this guy's got it. There's some IQ here.
There's no
stupid. The story's really stupid.
I can't even understand. Like you're saying, what technical aspects of the guy's writing? The plot doesn't make any sense. It doesn't even begin to make any sense.
Can I talk
like
for a second?
The idea that you got the idea
save us from this conversation.
Even in the first issue, right?
Yeah.
The very idea that you have a mass killing of 19 people in a country in a member, and there's extra cities. So here you have a U.S. population of 400 million. The idea that 19 dead bodies in Montana is going to change the laws of the country of the United States in a short enough amount of time
that's Tom King's point, though.
That's so
no, it's not entirely. He's basically saying no, it does. They're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats. That's what he's trying to say. Tom King's trying to. I'm not saying he's right. I'm saying that's what he's trying to. That's his thesis.
But it's so divorced from. I mean,
it's
it doesn't
not that
even.
Divorced. It's not that divorced.
How many laws did we get from two guys murdering one homosexual kid in one drug deal? Way back when. I mean, we had a bunch of laws passed because of that one case, and that was even less than 17 guys. I mean, it's possible that a story can grow huge. Yeah. I mean, goodness, look what happened in 2000. You know, one small crime story just dominates if they want it to dominate. You know, it happens, and so. It is possible that something like this could be.
This isn't just like, hey, let's decide that hate crimes are a category, and and in blue cities that are already trying to make that work. Because that's the thing. When you look at the Matthew Shepard situation, is they were already dealing. There were already.
This is why I wanted to talk. This is why I wanted to talk.
Yeah, let's let Hutch go for a bit. You're fixating.
Let me talk because I wanted to say exactly this. That yes, this case of one Amazon who kills, 17 men should be the case where Wonder Woman says, I'll get to the bottom of this. I'll find this because she's my sister and I need to, and then we follow a story where she chases down this murderous Amazon. But instead, we just get a page of talking heads and them talking right to the camera about all the stuff that has happened since then, because you can't show this. You just have to have talking heads. Yeah. And they're all speaking in unison, all saying the same slant. And all saying, oh, this is horrible. Why are there's Amazons everywhere? And I agree with you. It's weird that Amazons live here at all because Wonder Woman should be the only person who's left the island, as far as I'm concerned.
Maybe Artemis, or there's a couple other characters. There's always a couple outliers.
There should be some on the island.
There should be some who live at the embassy or something like that. But having them all, it's like it's weird that they're all over. But this has been done before when they had Amazons at War or whatever it was called back in the early 2000s. What's that? Amazon's Attack. Yeah. It was a terrible story trying to take on the Patriot Act and the War on Terror. And it actually had U.S. troops shooting unarmed women in the back or trying to until Wonder Woman jumps
It also
in.
had the attack. It had the attack bees. Batman says,
"Boy, I didn't even see that."
My gosh,
yeah, bees. All right. So one thing I want to say, one thing that I think is the thing that I find most obnoxious and irreconcilable. This is Teresa's point. The most irreconcilable part to me, and this just shows you how both left and right see the world. By the way, is the fact that according to Tom King, the secret people who run the country and can take a political event and ramrod it through to change the world are all, he's stuck in the Patriot Act time when the Republicans were able to kind of push an agenda.
And that itself is fake news.
But let me finish.
Let's not get off on the Patriot Act.
That is legitimately narrative that the Democrats forwarded to cover the fact that they largely wrote and all voted for it.
But let me finish though. But the idea here that's being sold is that the right has way more power than it does. Because all the talking heads, we know that anytime you would actually get a line of talking heads from the news, they're not all screaming right-wing talking points. That's silly. That is fantasy. That is not the way the real world works. It hasn't worked that way for a very long time. So the whole conservative consensus, what do you have to go back to Reagan or something to get that level?
And even Reagan didn't have a real conservative consensus. He was cut at the knees constantly about it.
He had more of it, but way more than what Tom King assumes seems to be happening now.
If there was a real conservative consensus, there wouldn't still be a Department of Education. That wouldn't exist. The EPA wouldn't exist anymore.
So the point I'm trying to make, is that people on the right often say that there's this huge liberal consensus with the media and the deep state and all powers that be.
There is.
So we would actually see the sovereign, right? The guy, the secret king who's lying and disinfoing the entire American people. We'd see him as a left-wing figure. Tom King sees him as a right-wing figure and depicts him as such. That is our current political reality. The left see this version.
That's the other thing that's frustrating about this too from a political structure aspect, is because the concept of the sovereign, the total central control, is not a right-wing idea anyway. The only reason the sovereigns had any kind of functionality in the pre-mass media world is that they had decentralized power and people all throughout the country that were actually executing basic rules. But that would mean that every little baronet could be prone to be could run an opposition to them anyway. I mean, that's what the whole Magna Carta was about. Defying centralized control.
Can I explain for the people who have not actually read this story what they're seeing on the screen there? That is the sovereign, and he's introduced here, and this really bugs me, is that I mean, there's always been the Illuminati type, stories about the people who really control America. I mean, how many comic books have been about that? But
Amanda Waller's the whole, like, that's her whole shtick. Is she's basically deep state.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, that was never the intention with her, but that's what they've kind of turned her into. But where he's actually like the head above the king, as he explained it, that the president signed something and then he signed it, making it official. And supposedly he has descended from the King of America, going back to before George Washington, and everybody, including George Washington, Abe Lincoln, Ronald Reagan, they have all kissed the ring of this guy and his ancestors,
because they're all men.
And it's just, it's like, this is making this true, as in this is the truth for the DCU, going all the way back, that there's never been a president of the United States who was actually in charge. It's all been a fake.
Well, Hutch, I got to jump in on there. Okay.
Infuriating. Go ahead.
Hutch, I think this thing will actually make you less infuriated, because we know this character. That's by the way, this was kind of infamous on social media for a hot minute. That's the lasso of lies. He's narrating this story.
Yeah. And so he could be just a big liar.
So we know he's a big liar, because that's his whole superpower, and the lasso of lies is to inject lies into reality. And that's essentially, again, you can see what Tom King's doing here. This is what obviously he thinks that people on the right, Donald Trump, this is like Donald Trump is just lying into reality and creating. This is essentially his Trumpism allegory. But my prediction for this story, right? Because you can't really do Lincoln that dirty. If anybody, right? So what they'll do,
you can. You absolutely can. It wasn't that long ago that there were people in the mass media wondering where the next John Wilkes Booth was.
Well, my point.
You absolutely could do Lincoln that dirty.
My point is that what they'll do is they will show how they've already kind of like planted. This is some of the clever bits that I think Tom King is doing, is that he's milking our outrage at all this. This can't be. And what he's going to do is he's going to reveal how much of this has been unreliable narration, and how much of it has been a lie. And the truth is actually this. And it's going to be Wonder Woman breaking us out of the conditioning.
But the president of the United States in this story does kiss his ring. You think he's just been circled with this lasso of lies and told that this guy's always been descended from the kings of America, and it wasn't true. None of it was true.
If you read past issue 6, we start getting panels that are shown to us that are clearly lies.
Okay.
So one of the wonderful things that comics does that's also really clever is the fact that you can show someone something on the comics page, and you can have dissonance between what's actually happening, because people go, oh, I saw that on the panel. But because it's artistically depicted, a very clever creator can come back in later and say, actually, that panel was a lie. That was an illusion. Here's what actually happened. So I think that some level of that, because like I said, issue 7 actually does that. So I know Tom King is working that into this story. I don't know to what extent that payoff will be. I will say that Tom King has been notorious for not sticking the landing. So we'll see how he lands that plane.
Yeah,
but there is a part of me that has some I have to reserve certain judgments, because I know he's going to go, haha, you thought this. Like, I know that's coming.
Okay, so here's my counterpoint just from issue 1.
Okay.
Right? Is that we have Wonder Woman having normal conversations with Steve Trevor. Right?
Yeah.
And then she goes to investigate the whole deal with her lost sister, trying to figure out what's going on with it. And does she go on the slide? Does she walk through? Does she investigate people? No. She shows up in the Wonder Woman costume, drawing out the Special Forces unit as an excuse to have an action scene in a comic that has had no action.
Yeah.
So at least no heroic action. You've got Sarge Steele doing the taking out the Amazon lesbians, and in front of their adopted daughter, which is
you wish that you wish he'd just come up with a new character instead of corrupting Sarge Steele this way.
Yeah.
Can I put one of my nitpicks here? One of my nitpicks is how they wrote the Spec Ops in these first 2 or 3 issues.
Yeah, they're horrible.
Because these characters, well, their level of knowledge doesn't match what they do. So the characters say, we have an army, we have an army, we have an army. They know they've dealt with superheroes before. If they're actually dealing with Wonder Woman, they either need to have like special anti-magic bullets from, Argus or something. They have access to it. Like Amanda Waller has so many,
all they need are net guns.
So,
make sure it's an all-male squadron armed with net guns.
Okay,
which is funny since a net is a feminine weapon. Feminine weapon.
Wonder Woman is, depending on how we're writing her, Wonder Woman actually is bulletproof. So like they would need special bullets. So that being said, the fact that Steel, who is written supposedly as a character who knows things, if he goes into a fight with regular guys with regular bullets and he's like, why are you not killing her? It's like,
he's stupid. That's the thing.
That part was okay. Well, I have no excuse for that.
The problems with Steel's character is that
bad writing.
The problem with Steel's character is that he is mercenary, he is amoral, he is snide, and he is careless. And none of those things define Sarge Steel. That's not Sarge Steel. It's Tom King for all I know. I don't know, but it's not Sarge Steel.
I did like this though. I did like this. Okay, so there again, let me point out some of the good things. So I like how I think it's right here. Where does it say that she was a dance?
Yeah, there's a little thing about how there's some dancing, but
when they describe her fighting, and it was like she's fighting this way on purpose. I loved that as an explanation for why she deflects the bullets, because it's like, well, she's bulletproof, she doesn't need to. She could just Hulk them through, and it's like, well, and that actually brings some femininity back into her character. She's treating this differently. She's treating it more like a woman might. I'm going to make this, I'm going to be more artistic with how I fight. I'm not going to be just brutal, efficient like Batman. I'm not going to fight like Hal Jordan, who just, who's like, ooh, what can I make with my green ring? I'm going to be I'm going to treat this as a dance routine. I like that. That's a nice moment. That was a nice thing to bring to the character. I got to point that out. Credits where it's due.
I will say one thing in Tom King's defense. The one positive, not only defense, but the one positive thing about Tom King. It is very clear through his writing that he very much likes his wife.
So he likes women in general as a thing.
But I mean, it seems to be characterized in ways that it seems to me fairly clear that he's a fan of his wife, and that's good.
So
he can never touch a writing implement again. The man should avoid keyboards. He shouldn't do anything. Shouldn't speak anywhere where somebody has the Dragon installed in their computer. Shouldn't be involved, even signing his name on checks.
Okay, all right.
Other people.
Okay,
he can do anything. If he can use if there's a fridge in his house that has alphabet magnets on it, he should ask somebody else to get him food.
So let me bring this up though. So
okay, I need the timestamp on that. We have to get that clip.
Back to the thesis here. In moments like this, we get this. I think this demonstrates the thesis that I had. Again, it's to me, it's disappointing that we got less of this and more of just bad writing. I have to concede that. But moments like this, where it's because Wonder Woman, going back to, again, for those of you at home, going back to the Golden Age version of Wonder Woman, she was always a feminist character. You cannot the creator, William Moulton Marston, was a diehard sub beneath the Dami Mommy, as it were. He believed in bondage, but he wanted this idea of love bondage for men. And the idea behind it was that if men have so much toxic aggression, and Reese, I know you're having an aneurysm there. I'm not. I'm just telling what someone else.
He did. It was like that's not necessarily wrong.
So his pathway
because the other Marsden just really wanted all sorts of excuses to get off.
So Marston believed
that's part of it. So
he wanted, his pitch for Wonder Woman was this idea that men needed to be bound by the love domination of women. And it wasn't, but here's the interesting thing, right? There were some interesting nuances to that are very different from the way Wonder Woman is written today. Old school Wonder Woman was about this It was partly an excuse to draw women in skimpy outfits in the 1940s. And the women were all lesbians until men showed up, and then they were all bisexual. So it was a very bisexual fantasy, because that's how Marston, I think that's kind of what he was. He wanted the orgy. He wanted men and women all together having kinky bondage sex. That was his.
It's like witchcraft is a great scam if you want to bang a lot of chicks.
So
I really need to watch that movie. Professor Marston and the Wonder Woman. I need to watch that.
Here's the fascinating thing about Wonder Woman, though, and this is what made it very weird to read this. If you read early Wonder Woman is extremely feminist, but it is also one of the most patriotic superhero books of the 1940s. It is more patriotic than Superman.
Mm-hmm.
Wonder Woman comes on the scene. She instantly falls in love with a man and instantly signs up for, and she's one of the only superheroes in the 1940s to work for the US government. She works for military intelligence. She is a secretary. She works with Steve Trevor. Superman didn't sign up and enlist. Diana Prince did. Diana Prince worked and then, caught Nazis for a living for the US government and assisted our boys in their fight against Germany. She wore the flag. She wore more of a flag on her outfit than Superman did. So what's very fascinating is when you read those old Golden Age stories, you get this very weird blend of feminism and patriotism. Patriotism because you couldn't show how pathetic our soldiers were. That would not be a good morale booster.
Well,
so even though I'm almost done. So
this is important, because I just want to point out that this is back before feminism lost its mind. Right? There have been at least 4 different generations of feminism here.
This is
hard to argue with that some other day.
This is Margaret. This was Marston was like friends with like they were in like the Margaret Sanger circles, and she was,
Mm-hmm.
even the regular feminists will look at Margaret Sanger and go, have some issues at times, I think. So my point though, and this goes to kind of what you're saying, Cartoonicus, is the fact that old school Wonder Woman was very supportive of the troops, while she also understood that at the end of this, we needed to, again, tie all the men up and, love on them until they, scream in ecstasy, and give up all their toxic power. That was not a canon story. That was a magazine bit that they did.
That's right.
It was like, what if Superman ended the war? They didn't. Part of World War II comics, again, is you couldn't have superheroes end the war because that it would take away from the sacrifice of people who were literally living and dying on the front line. So the writers of the 1940s were very deliberate and nuanced with how they approached a lot of those topics, way more nuanced than how we do it today. My point is to bring it back to this. The better moments of this story are when Wonder Woman is being kind of a little patriotic and respectful to the veterans. But issue 2 had these weird things. Let's talk about issue 2 so we get somewhere with this thing. Issue 2 had moments where because issue 2 has her directly fighting the U.S. military, and she would alternate. This was very frustrating for me, but Wonder Woman would alternate between being kind and respectful to the veterans and then saying, I'm going to drop tanks on your pathetic heads. And I was like,
yeah.
You were being respectful 2 panels ago. Why would you call these guys pathetic 2 panels later?
Well, and that's the other part of it. Even in this first issue, when he first, when she first comes on the thing, right? So it's a setup that she lured the people into the whole thing, but it's a setup, and they've got a sniper. The Sarge Steel has a sniper to take Wonder Woman out from a distance, right? But she hears the bullet and she deflects it, and then just starts beating people up, just tearing through people. There's no way there's not death involved. I know they said that there's not, but you can't even believe that for a second. And so it's one of those things where that's a super overreaction when you're faster than bullets, right? They have a small group of 6 dudes and a desk jockey and a sniper. It's obvious that they're overpowered with this small group of people. There's no reason to have her just wipe the floor with those dudes.
Can you pull up my screen? Because this is another moment where I want to show that Tom King actually has, and his artist, because we have to do both, right? But Tom King, when he has
I found this whole segment insufferable.
Insufferable.
That word again.
Right.
It's that word
Yes.
again.
It might be insufferable, but it's clever how he's working past and present into panel, like how the past speaks to the present. This is again where I'm saying I think Tom King has some intelligence and he's smarter than some of the people we like. How he uses it is insufferable.
How can there possibly be intelligence in this?
Wonder
It
Woman
took
doesn't
so
talk
long.
like this. Wonder Woman doesn't talk like
took-
this person.
It took
It is a
so
clever-
long to work through all of this that I
is a
stopped
clever-
caring
It is a
after
clever.
the second page.
It's a clever.
It was
sequence.
just torture.
It's
It
a
was
clever sequence.
insufferable.
No,
I
I'm sorry.
mean-
the fact that
I
you
mean,
can do a layout between two time periods and have it kind of, cut back and forth doesn't mean that's clever. It's
Okay,
not
and
clever.
there's no
It is clever. It's more clever than what sometimes Williamson.
Well,
I'm
okay,
sorry.
first of all, there's not. Okay, the whole end of the sequence with this here, where Diana, where child Diana, like 13-year-old Diana, takes a sword to the belly and she's bleeding out, and then she pulls out, has two swords, and she wins the fight against a taller, stronger,
That's not
faster
my
opponent.
point.
And that's not
my point. That's not my point.
It's stupid. It's
I'm not
stupid.
saying,
Everything about it is stupid.
it's not. I'm not saying it's
It is.
not.
It's
I'm literally talking about the visual language of comics here. That's it. I'm saying it. I'm saying that Tom King wields that a little bit more, I think, technically savvy than Williamson does at times, and I think that's worth mentioning.
Okay,
That's it.
so
to me just sounds a lot.
Here's my thing with that. When you the idea,
I like Williamson more. I'm pointing out.
No.
This,
What I'm saying is the thing you'd want to get to here is you want to juxtapose these time periods, right?
Yeah.
You want to tell parallel stories between these things, right? And ideally in a way that reflects the positive natures of your characters, because you're trying to develop Wonder Woman as fierce but kind, right? As staunch. And
that's only one way of doing it. So there's a symbolic way. There's a
when
symbolic way of doing this where you're playing with like symmetry that's a lot of what's being done here is work with symmetry. You have two, again, just the fact that you have.
But they're not parallel circumstances, and it doesn't even make any sense. And her reaction in both cases. Okay, so for Diana to determinedly not give her name in the secret battle to be the champion of Paradise Island. Okay. Like that makes sense, but that doesn't relate in any way to what's going on in the other panels. In the modern, there is no similarity between those events and the events in the modern day.
You're reading too closely. You got to take a bigger step back. This is Tom King's doing a. Stop making me defend people that I don't like.
You don't have to.
You don't have to. First of all, and second of all, I don't think you are. I mean, you're not.
I have to an extent because it's like because you have this the only thing it's not about the facts of the event. All right, we're dealing with themes here.
Okay,
right? It's just thematic, right? And Sovereign walks us through it. We have like the warrior at two moments of her life fighting two battles against staunch, immovable opponents, the immovable object and the unstoppable force.
Okay,
when
but they're not.
Meet,
that's not what's going on at all.
That's thematically, that's what's going on. It's about theme. It's not about what's actually. You got to divorce. It's a thematic thing, okay, and it's a clever thematic twist. Now, what you're pointing out.
Well,
I'm about to back up your point. Okay. So here's the thing. Thematics, when they work the best, will have better or really good synergy with plot or the diegetic level. So the level that we have just straight in front of us. So the greater amount of dissonance between the thematics and the regular storytelling level, the more weak we've got a thing. But it doesn't mean that the thematic thing and technique isn't happening. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
So I'm not saying what you're observing isn't the case. I'm just simply pointing out a different layer, which shows that craft is being wielded, even if poorly.
Right. But like craft is being wielded, but it's being wielded poorly. So what we have is it's like in Tom King's office, right? There is a prize wheel like at a fair, and along each of the little things are like comic book tropes and devices. And he goes into the office in the morning and he spins the wheel, and it's like, oh look, Today it's parallel structure. I'll write a parallel structure into it.
It's a little okay. I think that's being a little ungenerous to it. I think
Because
it's
the thing is, the
it's
parallel
more
structure
fair.
doesn't reinforce anything in the story. The
It
only thing
reinforces-
you've got these two unrelated events that don't relate to each other in thematics at all, and they
They
pinch
do relate.
together
They're
because
both,
you have
they're
a
both, how
no.
do they not relate? How do they not relate? They're both enormous battles.
Because they don't.
Let me,
Because it's not okay. Let me finish my statement. They hinge together on Diana saying no, thank you. Like that's the only thing they have in common. In one case, you have a situation where Wonder Woman, a child Wonder Woman, is facing up against her nation to be the champion of her nation, right? By the rules and the laws of her nation, right? On the other hand, you have her with no necessariness, with no impedingness, with all sorts of with a universe of other options in front of her, fighting against an overwhelming forces which are not overwhelming, and she doesn't even struggle with in the slightest.
That's what I was thinking.
Right? Because she struggles.
I see plenty of parallels here. I'm not saying that like there are problems.
They're almost inverse situations because it's not her nation, it's another nation. She's not defending anyone.
It is her nation. She is seen as, in both of these cases, she is representing. She is very much a.
She's absolutely not representing America in this story. She is the antithesis of the America of this story.
Historically, well, see, that's not. Nah, I don't.
In this story, she is the antithesis of this America in this story.
I don't think so. I don't.
Because
you've got to feature Halloweeners comment. Put it up on the bottom.
I see how you can see that, but that's not.
Because the America of this story is the America of the sovereign, and she is the antithesis of the America from this story.
But she still represents,
and even beyond that.
But she represents that actually reinforces the point that's being had here, because she represents true America,
right?
Just as she represented. I need that. Reese, let me
saying no, thank you.
Let me finish. Reese, let me finish. Okay, so the parallel being set here, right? Even if you don't agree with it, okay, what Tom King is setting up is like, here's Wonder Woman on the left, and then here is our Emily, whatever, on the right. Okay, Emily represents on the right in this moment, right? She represented like the strongest of Themyscira. She is basically like a kind of representative. I am Themyscira, the status quo or the institution of what Themyscira is, whereas obviously our younger plucky heroine represented the heart and spirit of true Themyscira, and that's why she wins. And they set up a very similar parallel here. You have Steve, who doesn't even want to be there. He has to be there because he is a cog in that machine. Meanwhile, Wonder Woman, who's on the out with technically Sovereign's America, still represents the heart of that America. Some of these themes still play out in a symmetrical fashion, and all I'm pointing out. And then we should move on. I'm just pointing out that there is some craft going on the page in how the layout and the story is being set up, and on some levels, it shows that Tom King is capable of more than what he delivers on. That is
he's got a copy of Writing Comics for DC Comics by Danny O'Neill, and 9 tricks every writer should know. And then he throws a dart at the wall, and every once again puts something in there.
Then someone
I credit him for having a good layout. That's all we got to do to make Cartoonicus happy is agree, or I'm sorry, not Cartoonicus, Twitless happy is just say yes. That's some craft. It's not the art craft. It's not
the artist. The artist definitely, and I do want to give props. The artist did a really good job with these panels.
The art is
really good, but my God, everything that the art is doing. I mean, and then the other thing is like Steve's whole Steve vacillates in this scene between being like angry and scared because she's facing it against an army, and then being like, I don't even know what I was worried about. Of course she's going to survive. She's the main character.
Yeah. She could just turn and run away at super speed and they'd never be able to get her.
She could, and here's the thing.
Speed. I always thought the speed was one of the few things she didn't have. She only has the jet for that.
No, she's got the speed of Hermes.
Yeah, she's got the speed of Hermes.
Does she?
It's limited. I mean, she gets tired.
In Golden Age, she could only outpace a 1940s car. So-
The most
No,
annoying
she
thing
ran
for me
with
about Wonder
Flash in
Woman
one
is
of her-
never knowing what her powers actually are.
Yeah, the Flash and Wonder Woman were like tied together with the rope, and she was keeping up with him while he's running. So she's
And-
fast. She may not be as fast as Super. She may not
She's
be
like
in the
Superman.
range.
She can do whatever they want her to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things. Yeah, and so that was the
When
the
I write her
inconsistency.
abilities and her limitations will be better explained.
very clear, very clear.
Just wait till 2037.
Okay.
I will
Speaking of which,
explicitly say what her abilities are.
Look,
can we?
more symmetry.
Speaking of which, can we skip to the page where it shows the whole splash
Wait.
page with all the military?
That we
Okay.
did. It's there. Yeah.
This is what I always have a problem with. Okay, guys, if one person can take on all of this, your character is too powerful.
No, disagreed. No, this is cool.
Sick of this crap.
I am
No,
very.
it's not cool. It was boring.
Mhm.
That's the part. Here's the part. Okay,
It was profoundly not cool.
here's what needed to happen. Okay, I will instantly fix this for you. Okay, so the first wave is them throwing in the normal stuff, and she cleans house. Then they say, okay, we've tested her a little bit. Send in the special ops stuff, and that's when they start using their anti-metahuman weapons because we know they have them. The U.S. military has to have anti-metahuman weapons. Oh my gosh, why aren't they using them? And one of the things I don't like that Tom King does here is because he's doing this thing with Sovereign, and he's really in love with the Sovereign's narration. Because he's really in love with teasing this out, none of the military characters act like they've only just met a superhero, and they don't act like and this conflicts, right? Because if Amazons are so ingrained into American society that we have to deport them via Donald Trump executive order or legislation, then that assumes that that Amazons should be a very known entity. This isn't like the first movie in a trilogy where it's like, oh, we've just met these people, we don't know what they can do. So they should have countermeasures. And so they say, oh, we could deal with Superman, but we can't deal with her. And it's like, someone in your staff has access to magic. You know what I mean? Like, magic is in this universe. You have anti-magic bullets at some point. You can do something. She still might win, but you would challenge her, and that would make the fight not boring.
That's why I said that this wasn't exciting at all, because all of the fighting was like so rote. It was so like 1990s, like 2017 girl boss martial arts movies.
Yeah.
It was less compelling than friggin' The Matrix in terms of its fighting.
They do in issue 6. I think they do a better job because they actually like use their resources better in issue 6.
And so then the thing that one of the things that bothered me about this issue too is that we're talking about military tactics never changing. That you start with artillery, then you go to the cavalry, and then you do infantry. And I'm like, that's actually not how ancient combat was. The infantry preceded the cavalry. So like, no, Tom, no.
I think the panel I have a problem with, and this is one of the bad panels, one of the ones I really didn't like. It's this one in the middle tier. Let me see if I can zoom in on it. And it really showed to me Tom King's but this is Sovereign talking though. But I thought I did read it. I could be wrong. I did interpret this as Tom King's voice through Sovereign. So that could be wrong. But this voice here, I didn't like. It was very cynical. Third wave of war is infantry, be it conscripts or, well, it's always just conscripts. If you can't do it from afar or with haste, then get the grunts to rush in close, kill and die in what you will tell their children was a patriotic mission. And this is a very, very cynical way of seeing American patriotism. And I'm not saying that we could preserve our vision of the military-industrial complex from after 1940, but it is a shame that original Wonder Woman came in and she was just gung-ho for the U.S. military in a lot of ways. And now we get this very world-weary sort of. It's very much a sign of the times for me. I didn't particularly like it.
Can I?
Before we get into that, I got to read this comment from Jim Cooner. He says,
"Go ahead.
Marsden had the usual messed up idea of female supremacy, where he would dictate himself how the female should be supreme.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Going back to the face off between the two stories across the times, with her facing off against what is it, Amelie or whatever her name is,
Emily or whatever.
Emily, yeah. The big problem I had, aside from the fact that Wonder Woman throughout this has a voice, it just isn't the way Wonder Woman talks or thinks or behaves or whatever. This I am so wonderful and you will bow to me type stuff. That is not Wonder Woman's attitude. And when she competed against all her sisters and she was masked, and I think, by the way, that Paradise Island has to be a lot bigger than we think. For them, it always seems like there's a few thousand women, and by the end of 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years, they should all know each other. And one shows up in a mask, and everybody's like, "Who's that?" It's like, come on. I think that's very bizarre. I almost think it would make more sense if they were all required to wear masks, so that full. And I still think you would know half the people just by I know who you are across the way, even if you had a full face mask.
Yeah, but the only 13-year-old might be the princess.
But she's not 13. This is the contest that they had for her to take back Steve Trevor. This is one of the problems. She's not unless they're adding a whole new thing where she was declared the top woman before Steve Trevor ever entered the maybe that's a whole new backstory or something. Because it also makes no sense that Queen Hippolyta would be watching up above as this one warrior says, "I'm going to ram you through." And it's like, why are you talking about killing one of your sisters? This is just to see who is going to take this guy back to civilization.
In the original, in the Golden Age, this version,
it was Olympics. It wasn't.
Gladiator. It wasn't. Well, there was definitely.
There may be, but it wasn't to the death type stuff.
It was in theory, right? Because here's the thing I wanted to point out is that in the original vision of it, the way they treated it was a lot more levity. Even when they said, "We're going to play our favorite game, bullets and bracelets," and then she wins because the other girl actually doesn't catch one of the bullets and it grazes her, and her arm is bleeding from a gunshot wound. So that's what I'm saying. Like, it's not gladiatorial, but they're literally shooting pistols at each other, for fun. But they treat it, and this is the thing I think is interesting, is that old school Wonder Woman treated combat as a game.
Yeah,
she was so far above it that she treated it. She would laugh. She would juggle the Nazis and she'd say, "Let's play bullets and bracelets. Let's play the game with you." And this version is like, "I will kill you." And it's what's funny. Here's the interesting bit. Here's something for people to put in their pipe and smoke it. This vision of gladiatorial combat is far more masculinist. It's far less feminine. Because the original vision was we all spank each other in private, and then when we go to do our physical combat, I'm serious. That was what
I know.
That's what Etta Candy was doing behind the scenes every single panel. So the point is the fact that you actually have Wonder Woman has become more masculine. She's become more patriarchal. She's become less feminine. And this is something that feminists...
Because that's what feminism has become.
Yeah. In the first issue of Ms. Magazine, they pointed this out. They wanted their old superhero who is like cheerful and feminine, and they had taken her and they turned her mundane. They turned into a secret agent who had no powers. And they said the actual feminists had a fit over it. And so there's a very interesting turn in how this character has evolved over time. But it's very interesting to see these gender dynamics play out in the current day, because like I said, in that final moment, we'll pull it up here, like she gets freaking stabbed. It's like, this is like brutal. Like, this is basically Tom King channeling 300, right? This is Sparta. Right. And it's like, that's not very feminine at all.
Right.
See, and that's
right down to her using a big phallic weapon. I mean, that's why Wonder Woman's been using a sword for the last 10 years. And it's like, no, she always had a lasso, which is an engorging weapon, like a net or a... No, seriously, is it different? Men use short, long...
Yeah, no, you're right. She's not wielding the phallic symbol. Yeah, okay.
That's right. I'm just saying that...
She does have a shield. The shield
There really is some psychology to this.
I will give this, if she uses a sword and the shield, she's wielding both. So I am okay with You can have gender balance at that point, but
Yeah.
Anyway,
The thing I want to point out though is the conflict, the final end of the fight with Emily, right? Is she's speared against the wall. Wonder Woman is or Diana, young Diana is speared against the wall, and she's bleeding out, right through the belly, right?
Yeah.
And what happens is then she's like, well, you have to give up now. And she's like, through the force of her will, she pulls the thing out and says, what you don't understand is that now I have 2 swords. Listen, Chippy, honey, 2 swords is not better than 1 sword. That's not how swords work.
It's better if it is better if your opponent now has no sword.
Well, yeah, but your opponent has a shield and you've lost a lot of blood, and all you have to do is get your swords knocked out. You get knocked to the ground and killed. Because this is a trained soldier, not somebody who's going to stand there like a chump, like an extra.
I was fine with this. That part didn't bother me.
No,
that was fine. That was fine.
This is the kind of thing. This is the kind of thing a person writes when they've never been punched in the mouth. That's what this is.
I think Tom King is
this is the kind of lame beta couch potato nonsense that a person writes when they've never been in a fight, when they've never had to shovel snow themselves, when they've never changed their own oil, when they've never been out to pick up dog turds in the winter. That's this kind of crap. This is the same kind of thing as in Mouse when Art Spiegelman complains about not even owning a hammer. It's that kind of nonsense.
Okay. I think there's plenty of really legitimate things to dig in without. I think that one's a little bit of a nitpick.
All I know is I like dual wielding.
Yeah, he does. Let me point out one of the moments I liked. It is right, I think, as she starts the fight, where she talks to the vets. Where is it? She says, here it is. I liked, actually, it was the same page. I'm an idiot. This panel here was another good panel. Right next to her pulling the sword out. She says, men in the field, I admire your courage. I honor your service and your loyalty. I do not wish to harm you. That's a good Wonder Woman line. I'm sorry. I will die on that hill.
That's a good line. That's a really good line.
So that tells me Tom King is capable of freaking writing Wonder Woman. He chose not to. That is Wonder Woman right there. That's actually a well-written Wonder Woman, because what she's saying there, she said she admired them, which means that we have a superhero who's not, one of the things I hate about a lot of modern superhero writing, here's my very minor soapbox. Everyone has decided to talk like Spider-Man and Deadpool, and Spider-Man without his thought balloons. Because Spider-Man was always trash talking while in his head was always thinking the opposite. He was always compensating for what was actually going on.
And isn't that brilliant?
For Spider-Man? Brilliant, yes. So my point here is that a lot of people have just taken superheroes just smack talk. They just trash talk their opponents constantly. I've seen this a lot in a lot of fan writing.
Let's be fair. We did create the term the punchline.
So let me bring this home. We have in this moment, she's respecting and even admiring the valor of her opponents. And I think she admires them partly because they're fighting someone who's way stronger than they are. And that is a level of nuance to a superhero that we need in today's superhero writing. I loved this panel. I was like, wow, you won me over, Tom King, for a panel. And then, wait for it. That was the same page. It is 1, 2, 3 panels later. I will over and over drop a 55-ton Abrams tank on your pathetic little heads. Why did you have to ruin it, Tom King? You had me. This is such a good panel. Why do you ruin it not even a page later? I'm bugged by this. I need someone in the panel to explain to me what is going on here. Because, like I said, this panel demonstrates that Tom King is capable, if he chooses, to write Wonder Woman correctly. But he chose to do this right here. Someone explain that choice.
And he has editors that won't just smack him around.
Okay. Hutch, what are your thoughts? Why did this happen?
I actually don't have anything to say about this. It's just awful.
No, but this panel's good. This panel's good. So how did we go from this to this?
Look, I have spent far too long trying to figure out how the person who managed to portray the unwielding power of Almighty God better than most Christian movies was also the same guy who wrote the line, "I don't like sand." So Just don't.
No, I want to think on this a little. I want to ponder this a little bit, because George Lucas worked with a team of people. A lot of the things we liked about George Lucas, some of it's him. He definitely had some vision there, but a lot of it, some of those lines, he didn't even write. Tom King wrote that line, and then he wrote this one 3 panels later, and I needed to kind of take a second and just ponder that. How can you write a good panel and then such a bad one right after it?
I think it's the brutalism of the propaganda, right? The idea that he has to try to, he can't. Wonder Woman has to be a badass, because like you find the same thing in the 3rd issue, right? When between the time when she first shows up at the secret headquarters of the spy or of the law enforcement agency, which has a secret headquarters, which doesn't make any sense, but okay. Yeah, that doesn't even begin to make any sense. And then with the end of that, with the where she reveals the invisible plane, which also doesn't really make sense. I don't get that.
I don't think
it has massive guns on it.
Yeah, the mini guns on it got to me. Why do they have Vulcan cannons? Okay, go ahead.
Well, but yeah, so I think, but there is this. So you have this idea of femininity that has to be colored with masculine brutalism.
Okay,
and
all right.
So then you have Wonder Woman sounding like a thoughtful, caring, concerned woman, and then like a stupid dude bro in the bottom panel.
Okay, you're onto something. This is what I've been trying to get at since the beginning of us talking about this comic. This is kind of where I'm getting at with about Tom King's Wonder Woman. This page I think encapsulates it, which is you have someone I think who could, under the right circumstances, and I think that there's that storyline that we get later where like she takes, because this is actually what's very fascinating. Another thing we need to think about is that this is a Wonder Woman story told for boys, because in issue I forget, is it 5 or 6 or one of the later ones? I haven't got that far yet. She takes a boy who's suffering from cancer to the island where boys shouldn't go to have a day of of fun, and she's specifically nice to a boy and is like, I'm going to be nice to a boy. And when the girls say, no boys allowed in the club, she says, piss off. So this Wonder Woman story that Tom King is telling is it's male feminism told for boys. It is meant to be there's some fascinating layers to this.
Wow. It's like the inverse of a Nancy comic.
Oh, you mean like the comic strip?
Yeah, the Ernie Bushmiller's Nancy comic strip.
Mm-hmm. I'm not that familiar with Nancy.
Well, yeah, I don't want to get into it a lot, but I mean, Nancy is a prissy, somewhat homely tomboy, very very steeped into the early 20th century idiom, and precocious, sweet. Sometimes crude, in terms of for a Sunday morning strip. Crude in her attitude.
I just know she hangs out with like a real blue collar boy. It was a
Sluggo, and Sluggo is a really interesting character, because Sluggo started as the bully antagonist in the strip, and then evolved into the reluctant like love interest.
So how does it connect to Nancy though?
Well, I mean, it's like an inverse of that, right? So Nancy is a little girl who doesn't seem very girly, but really is, because she's a little girl who's learning how to be a girl, right? And in this way, you see somebody who seems girly but really isn't, because it's written not for a male gaze, it's written for a male mind.
And that's why, those are the layers that make me interested in Tom King's run on this. I just wish, this goes to Hutch and everyone else's point, I think that Tom King is even letting himself down here. I know like at the end of the day that some of us would never really get on board with what the kind of story he would tell to us. What I'm saying though is that I think he's letting himself down even in the story he wants to tell, because there are these flashes, there are these moments. Like I said, gosh, I like this panel. But it's like, as you mentioned, I think other things, and this is kind of what I was trying to say earlier, that the weight of the propaganda, the Trump derangement syndrome, for want of a better term. The fact that everyone in fiction, you boys that called it no escapism, and the idea that the real world has to just be on every fictional page all the time, and it has to be 2024. We can't, everything has to be seen through the lens of 2024.
Well, I mean, really, this is 2016. We haven't even gotten to 2024.
Well, that's a good
yet.
point. You're right. Yeah, exactly. It's just 2016 over and over again. Very good, astute observation. What I'm saying though is that in 50 years from now, people are going to look at our media from here and they're going to get really bored of it. They're going to go, well, why? I don't get these political references. I don't understand what's going on here. These people really seem to be obsessed with just a segment of their history and just made everything circle around it. I think it's going to be a shame.
I was just bored of it just reading it now.
I thought some of it was all right. Like I said, I have, I think, the most generous take on this, but I can't help. And parts of this made me mad. Like, don't get me wrong. The first issue, my eyes rolled into the back of my head with all the propaganda. I guess what I'm trying to say is that Tom King is I think a more capable writer than he's allowing himself to be. That's my final take here. I think Wonder Woman is still the best fit for him, just because of what he brings to the table and what Wonder Woman always is. He seems to love feminism. Wonder Woman is a feminist character. That's pretty clear. When Hutch gets back, I'm gonna have to ask him how he's going to account for the feminism of that character.
So, is it that
I'm
he's
here.
actually capable?
You're just popcorning. Okay, I thought you might have to.
Well, I was also looking through a book, and I didn't want to be rude, so I've been trying to find this cartoon about how Amazons use weapons, and it's from an adult cartoon series, so I can't really share it.
All right, Hutch. How are you going to account for the feminism that this character, feminism and fetishism that this character is, like, that was in her from, like I said, before she was even created?
I think that'll be fun.
Okay, all right. Well,
I actually, I was trying to break into DC a long time ago, right? And I actually had a storyline. I won't get into the details of it, but it was one of those half the Justice League has to fight the other half of the Justice League type of things, kind of inspired by JLA 200, one of my favorite stories from way back when. And when they're talking about, okay, we know how to, Green Arrow has a kryptonite arrow. Okay, Green Arrow has a fire arrow and a yellow arrow, and they're listing out, who can take on who, and they're like, what do we do about Wonder Woman? And does anybody know her vulnerabilities? And they start talking about, well, I think if you tie her up with her own rope, she loses her ability, or is it she has to be tied by a man? So Zatanna can't just have her tie her up in a rope because it's a woman doing it. So that wouldn't work.
In Golden Age, I think. Okay, give me a second. I can look it up because
I'm just saying, as a they aren't clear on what
they're not clear on it. Okay, gotcha.
Like Batman knows. He's thought all this through. They haven't. The other Justice Leaguers haven't really thought this through, and they're like, okay, so I believe if she has her manacles bound together, she loses her powers.
That's it. Yeah.
And so Green Arrow's like, okay, I've got an arrow, but it's got the clamps, and if Zatanna can make her hold her arms out like this, then I clamp down on there, and that secures it. And when they actually do the fight, it's like Wonder Woman breaks it apart and is like, I was bound by a stick, not by a man. A stick in the air is not a man. They're like, oh. And then Elongated Man ties her up in an elaborate BDSM type thing with her feet pulled back to the back of her head, and he's like, don't tell Sue where I got this from. And he's like, joking. He's like, okay, tied up by a man with a man, that has to be something, right?
I think that would work. Actually.
And then she starts hitting her head against his like a punching bag, and it's like, you can't, they're trying to figure out what the rules are, because they're like, I heard this, maybe that isn't true anymore, because it's kind of a joke about how she's kind of changed from back in the Golden Age, but they're just talking about that. So yeah, a lot of those old rules, they kind of let go, kind of like Aquaman's one rule about, you can't be without water for an hour.
For an hour. Yeah, that's.
Although that is how his son was killed. And I don't believe they've ever retconned it. So I don't know what the rules are anymore. And that's the deal with a lot of DC. I don't know what the rules are anymore. Like I say, I don't know that Wonder Woman is bulletproof. What's the point of doing all this if she's bulletproof? And yes, I've seen that cartoon where they just, all the bullets do is make her breasts bounce so much so she's back to blocking it. But we've all seen that cartoon on Facebook. But
the pitch that I liked that Tom King did here was that she's doing it as like a stylistic choice. This is how she fights, and she kind of fights in a sort of feminine dancing sort of way. And I liked that. I'm like, that's clever, because like that's a good way for accounting for why she chooses to fight this way when she could just tank it. But it's like she's not the Hulk. She wouldn't fight like the Hulk. She shouldn't fight like the Hulk. She should fight differently, even if it's a stylistic choice.
She picks up a tank.
She's supposed. That doesn't bother me too much. If she's using the lasso, I like she uses the lasso to do stuff.
Well, and as if that made any sense. That's not how ropes work.
It's a magic lasso. It's magic. Like I'm going to give some grace there.
All right.
But what I'm saying though is the fact that I like it when writers can find clever ways to be like, oh, this is why she fights in a particular way, when the real answer is that we have a very messy history that goes back almost 100 years.
So now, before we get into the rest of the thing, there is a whole comic we haven't touched on, and we've already been at this an hour and a half, which is longer than anybody said we had time for tonight.
Yeah, I think we might need to cut it for today.
So do we want to adjourn and figure out where we're going next? Because actually, next week I know the show for next week.
That's fine. I think I'd like to do the first 6. Part of me wants to touch on issue 8 for just a second and simply say this is sacrilege and that's it.
On issue 8?
Issue 8 is the one that violates all my scruples and makes me angry. Because you don't drag my Lord in Scripture into your comic book and then have your superhero character look down on my savior. I will come to your house.
They did that with the rescue what do you call it, Make-A-Wish boy, where he's like, did God make me this way? Because is he killing me because I like women instead of men, or like because I like lady things instead of boy things? And it's like, oh my gosh, is he going here? And then Wonder Woman like rejects gods, and it's like, the kid's religious. You shouldn't be doing that. That's a worst possible answer, except that it's what Tom King thinks.
I always hate it when superhero, like I said, Tony Stark. There's no superhero character who should be an atheist. They've all confronted gods,
right?
Like they're on first name basis with them. They've seen them. They've seen the anti-monitor. They've seen the presence on some level. Like at some point.
I mean, and it makes sense in some ways where you have like the character who's super hyper skeptic, who's just like, I'm not even going to wait, my opinion about this sort of stuff. I'm not going to affect my day to day. I'm going to go on about it, whatever.
That part makes sense. But to simply say, I'm logical and gods don't clearly exist. It's like, what?
That storyline where they went and got Hal Jordan to be the Spectre again. You remember how the Justice League is like, okay, half the team is going to heaven, the other half is going to hell. And it's like, just like that? And then without explaining how, they end up in heaven or they go to hell like it's a real place.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the craziest thing. It's
So
and then,
and
then Mr. Miracle picks the locks of the Golden Gates, which I love. It's a great joke, but
when you've got Zariel, a literal angel on your team, maybe it's time to start thinking about Jesus. I'm just saying.
Anyway, that's where Tom King crossed the line for me. I think it's like issue 8, and it was like, you have crossed the line. And that's, but
Matt, if you look at our chat in Facebook, I sent you the cartoon, so you don't have to go to the site that it's from to see it.
I'm gonna kill Jim.
What? Selling bears to the devil in blankets. Oh,
the only way that you could make that worse, Jim, is if you bring in Kingdom Come.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about Kingdom Come today. Okay, so that's the show. Hopefully, you guys found it interesting and intriguing. Next week, we are going to be hosting or the return of, and I'm not sure who's always going to be here. I know I will be. But Lennox, what is his first name? I can't remember his first name. He's doing a crowdfunder for his series, The Lords of the Cosmos, a comic series, indie comic series that is inspired by He-Man and the Masters of the Universe and 80s toys of all kinds. And he's going to be here to talk about his campaign and what he's been doing with it and what kind of reactions it's gotten and all that kind of stuff. And so I probably in 2 weeks will be back on the Wonder Woman train, unless I can nail Marmaduke, number one Marmaduke fan down to talk about
Jason Lennox.
Jason.
I looked it up. Jason Lennox.
There you go. I couldn't remember his first name for the life of me. I just talked to him earlier today.
He's Mar.
Anyway, so yeah, that's the brief schedule. I was hoping to have a more thorough schedule done, but my life kicked me in the nuts. Anyway,
it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah, we've got 2, maybe 3 weeks figured out. That's better than we've had the last year, so I'm pretty happy about that.
Until then, keep reading Tom King's Wonder Woman every other panel. You have this decent option of, like, if you read every other panel, you can get like the good one panels, and I almost swear that's how he wrote it. It was like every other panel it's gonna be cringe. Actually, it's not even every other, unfortunately.
It's like every
fewer.
third or
It's every fewer than that. Yeah.
2 out of 5.
Just skip the narration boxes.
Yeah.
It's all narration boxes.
I like I actually, the narration was, I think, the part.
I like the device of the
like
narration box.
Yeah.
I found his so tedious.
I'm on the fence. If he sticks the landing into something clever with it, I'll go, aha, it was worth it. If he does something stupid and cringe, then it'll actually make me.
Well, and it's like last note. I know we said goodbye, but one last thought on it all is it's just like so much of these first 3 issues. I felt exactly the same way I felt reading Bendis's Powers, where there's just like there might be a story here, except with Bendis, there definitely was a story with Powers. It's just that it was like this much story, and he spread it over this much space. And like, but there's just so much there's so much nothing that happens in this thing, and to rush through anyway. I've already done. I just gotta stop. I gotta stop. Stop. We're cuddling it. We're gonna come back to it. We're leaving, guys. Get out there, read some comics. Just love some comics, and we will talk to you guys all later.
Read better comics than this.
Read better comics. Read Twinless's comic. Let's do it that way. Okay.
Yeah,
bye. We're gonna call it. We're pushing the button. Wait. Go. There it goes. Play. Bye.